Morning, everybody. Hope you all had a good evening last night. Welcome to day two. We've got a really busy morning this morning, but I just wanted to give a little plug before we start to our magazine, which we just started. So you probably get endless emails from me. I'm Andrew Slaven with Energy and Mines, but I do encourage you to have a look at the magazine we've started to publish. It's a bi-weekly thing, and last week the big feature was hydrogen. I think it's in 2 weeks. Our next one will be, and it'll be a report on this event, plus a big feature on energy storage. And the new thing we're going to do is actually do new project reports. And I think a couple of weeks ago, was it Advanced Energy Resources in Australia announced a 40 megawatt solar hybrid project in Mali, and we're doing a feature on that as well. So please have a look at that magazine. So this morning, we're back to case studies, and we're kicking off with a very innovative wind project from Argentina, and I'd like to welcome the Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Energy for GOLDCORP, John Mullally. Thanks, John.
We just talk to this slide, I guess. This is a good one. Good morning. So I'll just set out the agenda for this presentation. So as Andrew was saying, I'm the VP of Corporate Affairs for GOLDCORP and Energy. So sometimes people remark that that's kind of a strange combination that you'd put together corporate affairs and energy. And I think what we'll see here in Argentina is this is a case in point where you will start to see how conditions, political conditions, social challenges, environmental kind of imperative around climate change, and all these things are really contributing to putting together solutions for mining companies. In particular, GOLDCORP sees a way that we can partner across those different types of functions and look at these challenges in a comprehensive manner to really find some interesting solutions. So, here we are. Just a quick safety share. As we do with all of our meetings, I'll touch on GOLDCORP very quickly for those of you who are not familiar with our footprint. CERRO NEGRO, as I mentioned, so it's all the way to nearly to the tip of South America, very, very close to Patagonia. So the remote factor is very much in play there. And how we look at sustainability, innovation, and in this case, how that has complemented, or sort of, at least in some ways, we've had to react to some of the energy reform in Argentina. The sustainability approach is really critical. That's a region. Argentina is not a particularly, it doesn't have a huge, long history of mining, so it's also important as we move into these areas and we look at community development. It turns out this particular community that I'm going to talk about, Perito Moreno, had a huge challenge on its hands with a diesel generation in the middle of the town. So that played into the kind of solution that we found here. And the energy opportunity at the mine site, we'll talk about that quickly. The wind solution, so hybrid diesel wind was one of the solutions we looked at. We're actually moving into a feasibility stage study of a transmission line. So the description in the agenda or the program might be slightly different than what we're actually doing. That would be my fault, though. On the safety share, as I mentioned, Perito Moreno, much like any remote community that's diesel dependent, has faced a lot of safety concerns, health, and the use of diesel generation in this town has impeded economic growth, has put challenges when it comes to noise, interruptions. So this is just, I think this is a consideration, of course, too, for some of our Canadian Indigenous communities in the north, where we're looking to connect those communities to transmission as well. So that's just a quick safety share. Our portfolio. So we're focused on the Americas. You see the top left-hand corner is our coffee project in the Yukon. We have three projects in Ontario, three operations in Ontario and two capital investments ongoing there. We're operating at the Eleanor mine on the James Bay side of Quebec, or the Quebec side of the James Bay. We're also in Mexico. We have a 40-60 joint venture with Barrick in the Dominican Republic. And we have in Argentina at the very, very bottom, you'll see that's CERRO NEGRO. And we also have a couple of major capital projects in Chile. Part of this too, I think that the other portion that we need to look at is, of course, the economies currently in the industry. So our focus in BOLD is a big 2020 focus, looking at reducing our costs by 20%, increasing our production by 20%, and increasing our reserves by 20%. So as we look at any of these solutions, I think that that's also the sort of the economic reality and the performance that we need to meet in the market is really at the forefront of all of these decisions. We employ 15,000 people, about 4,000 in Canada. And again, the focus on improving environmental performance and reducing our water intensity, reducing greenhouse gases, this remains very much at the forefront of our strategy as well. So, CERRO NEGRO. So you're missing the map there, but I assure you that, as you saw in the previous picture, it's all the way to the tip. So the remote factor is critical here. It's about 2,000 kilometers from Buenos Aires, so it's an extremely, in terms of bringing, in this case, diesel fuels to the town of Perito Moreno. It's unsafe transport, it's long, it's costly. On the other side there was a picture of our sort of just the economic profile of CERRO NEGRO. So production there, peak production is right around 500,000 ounces, so it's one of the most important assets in the portfolio, and also a competitive asset as well. So we measure competitiveness as all-in sustaining cost, and that's right around $600. So you can see that the margins are significant at a, say, $1,250 price of gold. And there's tremendous geological potential. That mine went into operations in 2016, so the mine life is currently 10 years, but we expect that will go on for years beyond that. So again, investments in these types of energy solutions become more attractive the longer the mine life. So in terms of we think of development along a number of lines, one of which is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So a number of these fit into the projects that we'll end up looking at, in particular in the community. When we think of poverty on the top left, good health and well-being, affordable and clean energy, certainly infrastructure, number 9, and number 11, sustainable cities and communities. So this is sort of very much aligned with what the United Nations sets out in terms of its sustainable development goals. And the other part that I had mentioned as well is when it comes to innovation, the number of things need to come together. And one of the things that has come together for GOLDCORP is our approach and our strategy around innovation. We've been at the forefront in deploying cleaner technologies in the mining industry with many examples, including the all-electric mine at Borden right here in Ontario. The other thing we're doing is we host an event called Disrupt Mining to accelerate innovation and to really encourage SMEs that have not necessarily been connected to mining in the past to come into what's essentially a Dragon's Den format to identify very much disruptive technologies for the industry. So that event goes on the margins of PDAC. It'll be coming up in March. Other innovation, again, looking across the entire life cycle. And at this point, we consider that we're in development, still developing aspects of the infrastructure of the mine in CERRO NEGRO. But again, operational impacts when it comes to water, environment. The Argentinian political context. I had the benefit of actually living in Argentina shortly after the 2003 financial crisis. So many of you would know that there is volatility, considerable volatility in the economics and the politics of Argentina, ongoing at the moment as well. So recently the president of Argentina signed a $50 billion loan agreement with the IMF, an extension of their current loan, which has introduced, he's had to introduce import restrictions and increase taxes in some cases. So again, we see inflation at 40% in Argentina. So this is a backdrop in terms of the political context that many investors have been reluctant, certainly over the last decade or so, to make significant investments in Argentina. The CERRO NEGRO investment certainly warranted the dollar figure that we paid for it, given its geological endowment. And so we've been moving forward in light of that political risk. When it comes to the energy reform, so you will know, many of this is sort of being is being kickstarted by Argentina's target around clean energy, so that they would have an 8% share of renewables by this year, and going all the way up to 20% share in renewables by 2025. So they've been moving quickly. Certainly from a procurement, the contracts, 5 gigawatts worth of contracts have been doled out right now. There is backing as well, so investors have been somewhat heartened by the US dollar denominated 20-year purchase agreements. There's a backing of the World Bank as well for the World Bank guarantee. This is a big priority of the president, which is actually interesting because this was legislation that was introduced by the previous government, so this was maybe one of almost, there wouldn't be many examples of things that he carried over into this new government. So we are facing headwinds, certainly with the rate of inflation as well, and even up to now, when inflation was at a lower range, some of these renewable projects were having difficulties being financed. Again, I think so you have two things when it comes to the politics, really. So you have a will and to actually reform and to bring in more renewables into the system, but then also you have the backdrop that the political risk and the volatility in the economy is ever present. So those are things that we've had to weigh when we've looked at these types of decisions. So we're really focused in Perito Moreno. I mean, we have very ambitious social impact and development goals with all the communities that we work with across all of our operations that you saw previously. In the case of Perito Moreno, I think that the challenges are particularly acute given its remoteness, given in this case, the dependence on diesel generation, which has really stunted any kind of economic growth. So we've looked at, in fact, developed an approach that's been endorsed by the Inter-American Development Bank with Perito Moreno, looking at partnerships when it came to infrastructure. In this case, it's infrastructure, employment, procurement, taxes, community contributions, education, health, economic development, food security. So the hydroponic there, the greenhouse, is a project that is currently in feasibility. That GOLDCORP is involved in. And basically the way that we've gone about this is we've leveraged this provincial trust fund. So we pay into a provincial trust fund, which is between 1% and 2% of our total revenues from CERRO NEGRO. And that money is earmarked for these projects specifically. So this is, to me, the project team provided me this matrix, what I thought was pretty impressive. So we have across infrastructure, health and education, across the top, local content and economic development, and then also to our GOLDCORP visibility in Perito Moreno, so building and offices and being involved in sports and cultural events. And how the budget lines as well, so we've looked at provincial trust fund, we have a municipal trust fund. In some cases, there's bridge loans where we've looked at partnering with other financial institutions to make these programs happen. Just our regular budget, and then some other kind of what we call key CSR projects. So the budget line's just in on the left-hand side of your screen. I keep clicking down on my laptop as if that's going to move this screen. So if you're And not only that, but I don't know why that one is not there either. That's too bad. So as I was mentioning, what we have is top left, so $609 million in 2017 was our total production, the value of revenue coming out of CERRO NEGRO, and 6% of that went to the provincial and municipal governments. And then 26% of benefits, when you look at employment and procurement and all those, went to Perito Moreno. which is a community at the time was roughly around 6,000 people, has been growing as well. So if you think of 26% of $609 million going into a community that has 6,000 or 7,000 people, there's been a tremendous amount of growth. The bottom figure is what we've done. So that was sort of a flat line when it came to the CSR budget. And what we've done is we brought some of those contributions from the provincial trust fund forward so that we can finance, in this case, the transmission line, and that we can finance projects like the hydroponics greenhouse. So the energy opportunity, both at the mine, given the political context and the energy reform, and at the community, given the safety and the health and the approach to CSR, we had sort of two opportunities, either of which could have been kind of GOLDCORP owned or procured wind/diesel type of solutions. When it came to the mine site, what the government came up with, which I'll talk to here in a second, but there was arrangements that made it easy or easier for us to meet those regulatory requirements on renewables in the grid. So that was an important backdrop in terms of what made it, how we were, as I said here in the plan, how we were going to set up the mine for operational success, how we were going to continue to focus on reserves and resources. We need to meet or exceed these regulatory requirements, and of course, contribute to greenhouse gas reductions. When it came to the community, the plan really was around, again, safer and cleaner power, contribute to economic and community development as per some of those projects on the previous slide, and work in partnership with all levels of government. So when we front-ended that provincial trust fund, we needed to do that in cooperation with the province. So it meant that we were essentially reducing our future contributions into the trust fund based on bringing them forward. We couldn't do that without the province, of course. And these contributions in Perito Moreno, I mean, there is some of the selfish interests, of course, is the reduction and mitigation of political and social risks. Unions are very active in Argentina. 70%, in fact, of the population of Argentina, public sector workers that are unionized. So that's an important consideration just to keep the mine and keep the operations going. I did it again there. Okay. That's just a picture on the left-hand side of the state of affairs there when it comes to the power station in the middle of the town, and population growth on the just below that image as well. So we're expecting significant population growth, up to about 30% increase by 2026, and again, the current solution really, and even the wind diesel solution, we're probably going to be limiting when it came to the population growth and the associated economic growth. So the hybrid wind diesel, that line there indicates the wind. What we looked at were 2 wind turbines, 5 hybrid diesel generators, and just 1 conventional diesel backup. The transmission line, the blue portion is the Perito Moreno connection project that we're moving forward into the feasibility stage on. So it's a 63-kilometer, 132 kV line with a transformer station in the town. That's not in the middle of the town, but it's on the outside of. And there's also a 10-kilometer connection between a second town. So again, some of the strengths when it came to the wind diesel versus the transmission. If we just look at the economics, the top line economics, wind diesel was slightly cheaper, that project, in and around 45 million plus operating cost, though significantly higher, the cost of electricity. And the transmission line was, roughly the same, but with an OpEx, and not only the cost, but as you'll see in the strengths and weaknesses here, that the maintenance risk was significantly lower when it came to the transmission. So it's, you may argue that it's higher profile, the wind diesel. Of course, you eliminate more of the greenhouse gases associated with the power from the community. In the case of the transmission line, what's interesting though is as the system decarbonizes, we'll continue to take advantage of that, those requirements to go from 8% to 10% to 20 to the eventual 20% target in 2025. So we'll essentially be 30%, we'll eliminate 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions, or 14,000 tons of CO2 per year. Some of the concerns really were too, I mean, in terms of maintenance on the left hand, in terms of the weaknesses on the wind diesel solution, the complexity around operations and maintenance, you know, we could end up with the exact same risks that we currently have for the diesel generation, which is outages, and again, I mean, people who are dependent on the power that would be put into precarious situations. Some of the solutions, in fact, required battery storage, which increased the cost of the project significantly. And again, as I'd mentioned too, the issue there with the wind diesel, in part, was meeting that 2026 population and associated economic growth that we're expecting there. So the transmission line was supported by superior economics, in particular around risk. Eliminates the diesel station as well, just similarly to the wind diesel solution. It'll meet these future demands, and there really is. The thing is, in Argentina, it's got lots of generation. I mean, it's got lots of wind potential. It has tremendous amount of natural gas stations as it is. The biggest thing lacking in Argentina is transmission, in particular transmission in those remote centers that far from Buenos Aires. And, you know, again, the utility and the zero maintenance cost that goes associated with that. There was, you know, concern for either solution, frankly, that if we owned the solution, that there would be the closure liability associated with it. So, you know, working in partnership with the utility was attractive for that reason as well. So, the project, just in terms of conclusions around both of the solutions, so the solution for the, as I said, for the community was a transmission line, and we're currently in the feasibility stage of that project. And in terms of the mine site, our choice when it came to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and meeting our regulatory requirements is a PPA, a power purchase agreement. And so those were the two solutions. If we looked at as I said, when it came to the project economics, superior for the transmission line at this point in time. And again, the risk associated with, especially the operational risk and the maintenance risk associated with a wind diesel solution for the town itself, we were concerned about that. And the transmission line really does achieve the social, safety, environmental, health, economic, and political objectives for the community. The other part that was absolutely critical to this was partnering. So partnering with the municipality, partnering with the Inter-American Development Bank to develop that vision for social development, and then ultimately partnering with the Provincial Trust Fund, who will direct those contributions from the fund directly to this infrastructure project earlier than it would have otherwise. So it was a financial agreement with the province. And then when it came to the mine site, again, I mean, huge potential here in Cerro Negro for Goldcorp, and we're very much focused on building out the reserves and the resources and perpetuating the operations of the mine. So we studied the wind farm, but very much when we were able to have what they called this Mercado Termino. I speak Spanish, so I could just go through that, but Mater. Which was a deregulated arrangement for facilities that were greater than 300 kW. And that really gave us the ability to address what we wanted to address, so our greenhouse gas emissions and our willingness and desire to meet the regulatory requirements, but do it in a way that we can continue on and work on our operations and sort of focus on what we're trying to achieve at the mine site as well. So that was the 10-year deal, and that'll go up to 30% immediately, in fact. So we're currently 30% of our electricity requirements at the mine site are coming via the PPA with the wind farm. And our greenhouse gas emissions at Cerro Negro on account of that wind farm PPA have been reduced by 13,600. So I think, as I said, the outcome was a pragmatic one. Some of the lessons learned around this, there were a number of different solutions available to us, and all of which were being driven by our priorities as a company, so our overarching commitment to the communities where we operate. Of course, the imperative right now for all companies to act on climate change and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we were able to do this in a way that I think it's a solution that works for the mine site. It's going to be a solution that works for the community as well. That's why I sort of refer to it as a pragmatic one. But it's also too, I think it continues to show that, certainly policy and energy policy drive a lot of decisions when it comes to energy mix and choices around clean technology. So that continues to be the situation. We see that here in Ontario, we've seen that in Mexico. And we see that very much here in the case of Argentina. Working with, so partnerships take time, and the partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank, they're sort of like a third party and honest broker, and of course they're focused on development. So partnering with that kind of partner brings a lot of credibility to Goldcorp, but it takes a long time. So that's been ongoing now for 3 years. But putting that really seeds the overall kind of environment for these types of solutions, and I think that's been really critical. And so, and in terms of other lessons learned, the challenge of the community, I think, being basically the only investor in that area, there was really we really had to act on that particular issue. You saw the photos in terms of the diesel generation in the middle of the town and what that does to inhibit that particular town and health and safety and the precarious nature of that particular situation. So acting on that was critical. And again, I think the creative solutions and working cross-functionally and seeing that there are in many ways these issues are all interconnected, and that really helped, I think, find the solution. Eventually as well, I think that if we're going to move in a very fulsome way to innovation and clean technology, needs to be selfish for the industry as well. So there's lots of good reasons, and I think the political and social risk and mitigating that risk is a tremendous reason, and that's absolutely part of the business case that supported these decisions. So that was the energy solutions that we've looked at in Argentina, and I appreciate your time this morning and happy to discuss at the break. Thanks very much.